I started by creating a paper template. I glued a printed cutout onto cardboard using adhesive to ensure safety. I opened a window and sprayed the leftover adhesive until it was consistent. I placed newspapers on the desk to protect the surface from the adhesive. After spraying the cardboard with adhesive, I carefully aligned the paper template with the cardboard, making sure to avoid any air bubbles. After finishing with gluing templates together, I made sure to dispose of the leftover materials, including scrunched up newspapers, in the appropriate recycling bin. I combined the cardboard and templates using adhesive, then used a guillotine to cut the templates into smaller pieces. I started with the front and rear views of the car, followed by the side views. Once I completed the cutting, I compared the pieces to my 3D print and noticed that the scaling was incorrect. Using a ruler, I measured the front and rear overhangs and found discrepancies. I marked the corrections with a pencil after recalculating the overhangs. Although I was frustrated with my earlier oversight, I acknowledged that mistakes happen and decided to correct them. I consulted my technician about how to adjust the 3D print, and he advised me to reach out to a member of the estate workshop. After contacting him, we went to the workshop where he used a jigsaw to remove the excess material. I also requested sandpaper to smooth down the edges of the plastic pieces to prevent any injuries while handling the print. After sanding down the edges of my 3D printed wheelbase, I placed that print on a block of styrofoam and cut it off from the main block using a knife. Then I started individually cutting out space for wheel arcs. I cut them out by placing the styrofoam above my print and aligning my knife with the end of a wheel arc. Once I cut off my first bit of styrofoam, I used it to trace other 3 pieces of styrofoam that had to be removed. Then using same 4 pieces of foam that I had cut out previously, I had to fill the gap in styrofoam for each wheel arc. I split those pieces roughly in half to fit them in a hole. To glue them in together, I prepared a glue gun, but I quickly realized that it will melt the styrofoam. So I found PVA glue laying around and decided to test it by gluing 2 pieces together. However, PVA takes a lot of time to harden, which wasn't something I was ready to deal with. So I came up with a different solution. I found a thin layer double-sided tape and decided to test it too. It worked really good for me, so I decided to use it for my styrofoam base. I covered the surface of my 3D printed base with double-sided tape and peeled off a protective layer. Before sticking the styrofoam base to my 3D printed base, I made a cut under an angle for one of the overhangs so that styrofoam can fit on a wheelbase properly. Then I compared my styrofoam base with the template that I made, and it allowed me to cut out a correctly measured piece of styrofoam for the greenhouse of my future car. Finally, using a knife and a piece of sandpaper, I started slowly shaving off bits of styrofoam to shape it however I wanted it to be. I was using sandpaper over a bowl of warm water so that bits of styrofoam fall straight into the bowl and not creating a mess. I prepared a desk by taping down a cloth to a workbench. Then I brought 6mm planks that would prevent me from flattening the clay inconsistently. I placed a block of air-drying clay and a rolling pin to roll the clay into a sheet that I could cover my foam base with. I kept on flipping the clay to spread it equally. Eventually, I started spraying my sheet of clay with water to keep it moist and soft. Then I used 5mm tracks to make the edges of the clay sheet. Then I kept on covering the sheet of clay with cling film, after spraying it generously with water to keep the moisture inside. Then I double-check the foam base and make sure everything is how I want it to be. After I made sure everything is how I want it to be, I covered the foam base with a clay sheet. Then I took the sheet off and started creating creases and little cuts to make it stick to a foam base. I placed it on the foam base and firmly pressed it with my fingers. Then here I included time-lapse in which I will showcase how I was creating a clay model. I used a hairdryer to remove the moisture and to completely dry it once I wanted it to. At the end, I used sandpaper to sand down unwanted texture.